All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are back. The Hi-Fi Summit, day 4. There's too many names we have with hi-fi in it. I get a little confused sometimes, but that's okay. Today we're talking about turntable and turntable setup with Jeff from Pro-Ject, and we also have Josh from McIntosh Labs in as well. How is everybody doing today?
Doing awesome. Thanks for having us.
Of course.
Yeah, very well. Good to
Yeah.
be here.
Good to have you guys.
Nice to have some other people in the room.
Oh yeah. About over all that
know,
mess time.
Man, I'm down here in Austin, Texas. I don't get to have a lot of visitors, so I'm doing this the hard way.
There you go.
Jeff, what is that to your right? What speaker is that there?
So this is the beautiful new Olympic Nova 5 from Sonus Faber.
And why does
This
everybody
is,
seem to have a Sonus Faber speaker over here? What's going on here?
Yeah, well, I mean, in all honesty, we could have pretty much anything, anything we'd like. But from a corporate standpoint, Pro-Ject, we're part of Sumiko. We're distributed in the United States by a company called Sumiko, and Sumiko is part of the McIntosh group. So under the McIntosh group, we own, of course, McIntosh Laboratories, Sonus Faber loudspeakers, audio research. Then we also and Sumiko phono cartridges. And then in the United States, we also distribute Pro-Ject audio systems, which is what I'm here to talk about today, as well as also continual audio racks, which I have not yet picked one up. So please excuse the janky old hi-fi rack that we'll be doing for setup for today.
It'll work.
So
It'll work.
What are we doing today?
So today, I mean, we're going to talk a little bit about Pro-Ject as a company, just kind of some of the things that makes us cool. And then I want to go through setup of one of our new turntables. So we're going to talk about the X2. This is a $1,500 retail turntable that ships with a factory-mounted Sumiko Moonstone phono cartridge, so about a $300 moving magnet phono cartridge. So it's kind of, you're getting into pretty rarefied air for a lot of people when you start talking about turntables. A lot of times it's like, man, I got a record player. I think it was $200, and I can't believe how much money I spent. Whereas for this of us in the industry, we're like, well, $2,000, $3,000, $4,000.
Right.
If you're Josh, $14,000, how you roll.
Typically how I roll.
Josh,
Right,
he's a high
exactly.
roller, no doubt.
Yeah.
I mean, man,
So
we all have priorities,
Yep.
this is right.
I mean, I
so I'm
have
just trying
my
to show off some of the stuff we do.
Yeah,
Go ahead, sorry.
good. Let's go. No, I was just gonna say I have my Technics 1200s that I bought to start DJing back in 2001. They're still here,
tried and
Nice.
those things are tried and true, man.
That'll
Yeah,
work.
I actually got the
Wheels of
new
steel.
1200 GR. Value Electronics sent it over for me to review, and I was just like, "Hey, this thing's awesome.
Cool.
I'm not gonna DJ with it though. I tell you
Right?
that much." Yeah, I'm like,
Well-
I'll just play some records. Let's do that.
And that's actually a good, before we actually dig in and set the table up, I think this is a good entry to sort of the philosophy behind Pro-Ject.
Sure.
When you look at a company, 30 years ago, Heinz Lichtenegger founded Pro-Ject in Austria. The idea was at the time is there really weren't all the sort of great Japanese direct drive turntables that had happened in the 70s and early 80s that were still pretty reasonably priced. And then Thorens and Dual, who were making some great belt drive stuff, a lot of those companies had gone away. CD was really taking over the market. So that sort of really good mid-price turntable was getting harder and harder to find. So the market had kind of bifurcated into the really inexpensive plastic kind of rack system stuff, or DJ decks, or the super esoteric, the sodas. Some of these guys were just starting to come out. So what Heinz did is he found a factory that was in then Czechoslovakia that had been manufacturing turntables and electrical motor products for the Soviet bloc. But after Eastern Europe opened up, all of a sudden these factories that had great industrial capabilities, they thought they were all shutting down. They couldn't imagine anybody in the West wanted what they were going to do. Heinz had an opportunity to hear one of those turntables, immediately got in his car from Vienna, Austria, drove across the border. I mean, this is crazy for somebody that grew up in Cold War era Europe, right? Drives into Czechoslovakia and sits in front of this old Soviet style planning board and says, "Hey guys, I want you guys to build me a turntable."
All right.
And that was basically the genesis of the Pro-Ject 1.
Nice.
So we're, coming up on over 30 years now of building those sort of really high performance, music oriented for home use. And every turntable we've built since has been a real high performance, reasonably priced in their category. I mean, we go up to 12 grand, but whatever the category, we deliver an awful lot of value there, but always belt drive. We're real big believers in that. That makes them terrible for DJing, right? So if you're out there in a club, you need it to come up to speed quick. If you want to back you, you're going to rip a belt drive turntable apart. You can't do it.
I've had some nightmare late nights and early mornings on some belt drive turntables out in the desert. Like, just it's not an easy thing for DJing, but for hi-fi and just listening to records, totally different situation.
Yeah, exactly. And for us, there's a kind of thing. It's all about noise isolation, right? It's really tough. And one of the things that our friends over at Techniques, when you look at the amount of detail that goes into decoupling that motor from the platter, when the two things are directly connected, that is super hard to do. Chances are you can't do that in a sub $1,000, sub $1,500 turntable without getting a significant amount of that motor noise transmitting itself right to the platter. And once that vibration's at the platter, the stylus is in the groove. It doesn't know if that vibration is something that's physically present in the grooves of the record. It's going to pick it up, and it's just going to convert that to an electrical signal, send it on to the rest of your system. Whereas we feel real strongly that by physically isolating the motor, and then you can't really see it as well here, but this RPM 10 carbon is a great example of that. Like, the motor sits in its own separate little silo off to the side. It's completely decoupled from the rest of the platter. But by separating those two things and only having the connection point being the belt, we can minimize a lot of that kind of noise and vibration that we pick up otherwise. So yeah, everything we do is belt drive. But people ask that question a lot, like, why don't you guys do DJ decks? It's like, it's not our thing. There's some really, really great ones out there. We feel for a given amount of money, it's all about belt drive. We can get better performance. But yeah, and that's really kind of the genesis of it. If you look back, when the company was founded, a good CD player cost $1,500, but you can still buy a really good sounding turntable for about $500 US, and that's even come down. So we've got some great stuff now in the sub $400 range, and as I mentioned, all the way up to about $12,000. So for us, the sweet spot where Pro-Ject can really do some really fun stuff, in my opinion, anyway, is that sort of $1,000 to $2,000 range.
Right.
Because that's where the economies of scale kick in. A lot of people don't know this, but since our founding, we're now the largest non-Chinese manufacturer of turntables in the world.
Wow.
Pro-Ject can turn out between 10 and 12,000 turntables a month out of our factory in Litovil, Czechoslovakia, or Czech Republic, my fault. So there's a lot of stuff going on, and we do everything in-house. Whereas a lot of the companies you talk to, especially in high end and analog, especially, they're assembly houses, right? They don't have, it's one of the things that when Ken Zellin was on here talking about McIntosh, it's so special, right? You've got a company that literally takes sheet metal, glass, paint, and they make products in house. Pro-Ject's the same way. We do all our own chassis, we do our own paint work, we do our own carbon fiber, our own acrylic. Very, very few parts that go into this turntable come in from an outside factory. And that vertical integration, plus the amount of just the scale of the company, that allows us to do things that a lot of our competition just can't. So, you look at this guy to my left, the RPM 10 carbon, this is about a $5,000 table. And that's including an $1,800 Sumiko moving coil phono cartridge. I mean, we'll put this up against $10,000, $15,000 tables all day long. And we'll run. We won't always win, but we'll absolutely be part of that conversation. So we're going to show you a product today called the X2, which is, again, like a $1,500 retail table, ships with a really great cartridge. But the focus here was sort of like kind of demystifying the turntable setup process, because a lot of times, people either haven't owned a record player, and actually, well, outside of, I know one of you still's got the wheels of steel, but how many of the rest of you guys actually have turntables in your systems at home?
Yeah, I mean, I have one, but Mike, do you have one?
I don't have one, man. I didn't get into records.
This is it right here, the X2?
Yeah, that's right.
This white one looks pretty.
And hopefully you're over
awesome.
at ProJectUSA.com. That's our brand new redesigned website.
Okay, cool.
But great sound and great deck. So one of the cool things we wanted to do was kind of give people a really clean way to step up and out of our most popular model, which is the debut carbon DC. Big upgrade for that is people improve the platter. They take that steel platter off, they upgrade it with an acrylic version. We've got a big brother to that called the X1, which just won the ISO award. You guys might have heard that. That's the European Imaging and Sound Association. Really great. Actually, I should say they've changed themselves from European to Expert Imaging and Sound Association, trying to get out there a little bit more in the world. But the ISA, basically for best turntable, we're super excited about that. This is, a big deal for Pro-Ject to have a product in there. So that's the X1, then the X2, which is the guy we'll be talking about today. That's the big brother in the line. And we really look at this as sort of a real world flagship for a lot of people. Because, $1,500, it's a lot of money. And we want to make sure we're delivering a really great product, excellent performance.
John is like, I see the nice one there.
So that's our 6-Perspex SB. That's a lot of the same features, actually a lot of the same technologies. And this is a cool thing as you move up from a $300 project to a $2,000 project, which is what you have up on screen now.
Right.
The same fundamentals, right? We're going to take as much money as humanly possible, put it into the main bearing, so what the platter rotates on, the tone arm assembly itself, the bearings inside that tone arm, and then the included phono cartridge. So, as we spend more money, we can spend more money on things like the chassis. We can do real wood veneers. We can do more esoteric materials like acrylic. The guy you were just showing up on your screen even has a Corian subplatter that levitates with magnets, in addition to a spring suspension. So, we can do some really fun stuff as we have more money. And that's one of the things economies of scale really allow us to do. So let's get rocking. We're going to set up an X2. Going to kind of demystify this $1,500 table. I've done a bunch of these, and I guarantee you, because this is a live web stream, I will still manage to screw something up. So always exciting to see what I mess up on live.
It's all good, man. Let's do it.
But first things first, when you take one of these things out of the carton, I know this is old-fashioned, but this is my appeal on behalf of all manufacturers that are here on the live stream. We include these things for a reason. Please open the manual. I can't tell you how many times we get a call through tech support. Hey, what's going on with this feature? And really all we're going to do quite often is send you, hey, page 7, paragraph 3, here's a PDF. There's the diagram that you're talking about.
Yeah.
So we've actually done a lot better work with the PDF manuals that are included with a lot of the products. The other sort of general appeal, when you set up one of these tables, there's going to be a lot of little accessories inside the carton, and it's really easy to lose sight of a couple of them. So I've laid out a couple of the things that I really wanted to note that people always claim were not in the carton, but they're there. So the anti-skate weight, we'll mount that guy up there. 45 RPM adapter. We sell some nicer ones, but give you a little plastic one just in case you need it. In this case, we also include a pair of Allen keys. You're not going to need these for setup. The small one is for reinstalling a new phono cartridge if you ever needed to. The large one is for adjusting the tone arm height. So 99% of the Pro-Ject products that are out there, these things are already set at the factory, but these are tools that you can just keep in the box or keep with the manual. So down the road, if you ever need to make any changes, but don't throw them away. The one that people always ask about is this: what is this crazy little spacer thing? And that's exactly it. Just depending on the height of the phono cartridge or the materials of the phono cartridge, if you need a spacer between the tone arm itself and the cartridge, we include one. So that's typically things that are going to be in the carton that you're never, ever going to need. The other big question is, why the heck do we give you 2 belts? A lot of Pro-Ject tables, if they do have 2 belts, the round one is going to be so you can play 78 RPM discs, and there's actually a different ring on the pulley. Yep. Not a lot of folks are playing the old shellacs, but if you do have a 78 RPM capable cartridge and you want to play those old records, know that a lot of our multi-speed turntables have that ability. But again, that round belt, that's going to stay with the accessories. You're not going to really use it much. The square belt's what we're going to want. We also give you this crazy little key tool, which is a little, people always go, what the heck is that? We usually recommend, if you're handling the belt, you don't do it with your fingers. The oil on your fingers does come off on the rubber. So it's possible that can actually accelerate the wear of the belt and cause it to slip. So when you're handling the belt, if you can, either use the nice cotton gloves that we include.
There you go.
I was about to take white glove treatment.
That's right, baby.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, no, these are included in the X2. And if you're not using the gloves, at least use that little tool so you're not getting the oils from your fingers right on the belt. One of the things that we really like to show off, though, is the cable. And you'll see this same variant of cable starting around our $300 range T1 turntable. But unlike a lot of manufacturers out there, Pro-Ject actually does use a fully symmetrical, real balanced phono interconnect. So we include about a $50, be about a $50 retail cable for most manufacturers, where the shield is independent of the positive and negative conductors that we use for the actual, to carry the signal from the turntable up. The end with the little yellow markings on it, we float the ground at that end. So this is the end that we actually want you to physically connect to your phono preamp. The reason we do that is we want to keep as much possible noise and interference out of the system, and we want that to be grounded out. So just when you connect those yellow ends, that's what goes to the phono preamp. So we include a really nice cable right in the cart. All right, you're gonna lose me off camera here as I'm gonna get some stuff out of the box.
You're good. While you did that, you just made my heart sink when you put those cables on top of that beautiful Sonus Faber. I was like, oh.
Did we mention that all Sonus Faber loudspeakers have a protective lacquer finish?
There you go.
In this case,
nice,
it's actually
nice
a satin finish.
There you go.
Don't ever use them as a coaster, though. I will come through your computer.
Jeff will jack you up, man.
That's right. That's right.
That's awesome.
I may look mild-mannered, but you start messing with the Sonus Fabers, I take it personally.
That's right.
So this is something that you can see now. I'm just taking some of the materials out of the out of the bottom foam. This is another thing when you are unpacking these things, take a look inside the foam, because quite often there's going to be recesses inside these where we put things like the feet. That's where you'll find the counterweight. And you'll also find the power supply will be taped into the other one of the side. So it's another one of those common support calls. Hey, where's my stuff? It's like, it's right in the base of your packaging.
Box.
That's right. It's taped there somewhere.
And if they're multi-speed, then would the other speed rings also be in there as well?
Yeah, so we actually include the machine's aluminum pulley that we include actually has multiple speeds. It has 2 rings on it.
Oh, 2 rings on it.
So you won't actually require a separate pulley.
Gotcha.
If you've got a model that only does single speed, we do have pulley kits available for some of those, but an awful lot of them, there's actually 2 positions on the pulley itself.
Okay.
The other thing that's kind of cool with Pro-Ject, and we follow this across the board, electronics, phono, everything. But sort of one of the ways that we're able to keep our overall costs down is these, the turntable itself, it runs on DC. So there's no specific, direct current 15 volt. There's nothing specific about FCC or UL or any specific CE regulation. The power supply is the portion that actually connects up to your electrical mains. So this portion, we include a pretty nice basic switch mode power supply that has all the appropriate regulations. And then all of our devices, whether that's a phono preamp or a power amplifier or a streamer or a turntable, they run off of DC, which allows us to ship basically the same product anywhere in the world. And all we have to do is change out the power supply.
Nice.
This also gives us a super popular upgrade in that we do offer really nice either battery or heavier duty high current linear power supplies that can drive not just the turntable, but even maybe a phono preamp or an amplifier or a couple other devices. So in a big Pro-Ject system, you might have 4 or 5 devices that all are connected back to a single power supply, which also has a really nice extra benefit in that it gives you one unified ground plane for every device. So it keeps our electrical noise really super low. So because this is a universal power supply, you need to flip on a little United States power adapter. Okay, so I've got all the stuff out of the packaging. Now let's take a look at this beautiful turntable. Okay, so this, if you've not, be careful with these. This is pretty heavy. So this is the X2. This particular sample, this is in a really beautiful satin walnut veneer. And you can tell, actually, you can see the MDFs. You can see the unfinished MDF inside the chassis. We use a really nice, actually a high density fiberboard. So very inert, very easy for us to machine. But this also does a really great job of sinking any kind of vibration that was picked up by the main bearing or the base of the tone arm. So we get a really good stable base for the operation of the table. You notice the motor. I mentioned that CNC aluminum pulley. And then you can see there's the 2 rings on the pulley. Okay. So we've got the smaller outside ring and then this inside ring that is what we'll use for 33 1/3 and 45 with the big square belt. But nice heavy duty, nice isolated motor. And this is a cool thing. All of our tables, so anything that runs on a DC power supply these days, it's an AC motor. So what we have to do is inside the turntable itself, we have a really cool little circuit with a crystal oscillator in it that generates the exact correct AC voltage to make sure that this motor is turning at the correct. Yeah, exactly. Back in the day, we used to just sync this up to the 60 or 50 hertz whatever the service voltage was and whatever the line frequency was. So in the US, we're 120 volts, 60 hertz. So we would use that to figure out how fast the motor was going to turn. If you have any little fluctuation there, though, that means the motor's not going to turn at the right speed.
Sure.
So by moving to a DC with a really, really tightly synchronized crystal oscillator-based speed circuit, we can actually get a lot better rotation and a lot more accurate speed. So you'll find that on all Pro-Ject tables, starting at a couple $100. So here we go. So I got the feet out. Now, a lot of our more basic tables are going to have a flexible rubber foot already pre-installed. As you start spending a little bit more money, we can use a little bit nicer adjustable aluminum foot. And then we actually use just 3 in this case, because a tripod, just sort of in and of its nature, it's going to be easier to balance and a lot more stable. So we just spin those on. This is a 2-piece foot, a little tough to see, but you do get some flexibility. You get a little bit of give here. But most importantly, you can level them. We'll talk about that in a second. So spin those feet on, and then we'll place the table on our stand. And I apologize, this particular stand I grabbed is, you'd never want to run your turntable on this.
Right.
It's pretty
Fail.
fail,
this is
demo
for,
fail.
This is for demonstration purposes only.
That's exactly right. Well, I told
Do
you,
not
it's
do-
always exciting. You never know
do not
exactly
do this
how
at
it's gonna mess
home.
it up.
That's right.
That's right. So one of the things, when you place it on a stable surface, please don't do it on a table that's like what I've got here. We sell a nice little spirit level. You can pick one up at a hardware store, whatever. But it's really important that the turntable, its body itself is level. That's one of the reasons we give you these leveling feet. Because once that stylus, when you think about it trying to do its job, if you're already pushing it towards one groove or another, because the turntable itself isn't level, that's going to increase wear on that side of the record. It's going to increase distortion, and it's going to really it's going to hurt your table's ability to track properly. So you want to make sure it's balanced and level on both the front to back and the side to side plane. So get yourself a decent bubble level. Check that out. In this case, I'm a little bit back, and so it's a nice thing with these. We can easily adjust that. Get a couple mil of extra height on the front. All right. And now we're level. So that's kind of where you'd start. Next thing, this is what's called a sub-platter type turntable. So what this means is, unlike a lot of tables where you've got, the spindle's already sitting right up out of the turntable itself, we've got this little resin sub-platter piece. Now, this is one of the parts that, as you spend more money from Pro-Ject, you're going to get more rotational mass. So one of the ways we do that is the bigger, heavier part here. Because again, the more rotational mass we've got, once we get that thing up to speed, it's going to have a tendency to stay at speed. So we'll drop that right into the main bearing well. And I love that. So I don't know if you caught that.
Yeah, it just
kind of floats down.
But it floats down. So what we've got here is we've got a Teflon lined brass bearing well. And at the base of that, we have a really high precision, nicely polished steel ball bearing. But you notice that speed, the amount of time it takes for that to sink, that's due to the tolerances are so tight, it takes that long for the air to evacuate from that brass bearing well. So really high tolerance part. And that's super important because this piece, if there's any sort of rubbing or noise or physical friction, that's going to turn into rumble, which again, once that comes up to the platter, it can get picked up by the stylus. You have no way to differentiate that between an audio signal and just something happening inside the turntable itself. So
those
really
look like
nice to have a nice
bearings. I mean,
piece.
you barely moved it and it's just still spinning,
Oh yeah. Well, you take this is, I wish we should have set this one up. We could have started a counter.
Oh, there you go.
But
just let it roll.
Like the RPM 10 carbon. I took the belt off just so there's a little less friction, and let's just see how long that keeps going.
That's funny.
But that's really important. So next thing, belt. And I'm going to do as I say here.
Ladies and gentlemen, the gloves are coming out. That's
right. Look at that.
As long as they're not rubber gloves, we're good.
That's right. I don't want, sorry guys, trigger warning here if anybody's had y'all Y'all are too young for that, though. I mean, come on. Let's
Oh gosh.
all right, where did I put that belt? So yeah. There we go.
Check the speaker. There it is.
Uh-huh.
I was about to say check the box, you know.
Check the box.
It's always in the box.
Oh, let me call
included.
Sumiko.
That's right. It was
Let me call
included.
Sumiko. It was missing. If you're really, really, really got that great attention to detail, there's actually a Pro-Ject logo on the belt. So you want to make sure that's right side up. It does not make any difference in performance, I assure you.
It just looks cool.
Good for peace of mind, you know.
That's right. Those
All
OCD guys.
Well, that's kind of one of the fun things and one of the infuriating things with records. You know, the vinyl playback. By the way, you notice that turntable? That
It's
made
still
RPM
grooving,
10?
man.
Still
grooving.
spinning. Excellent bearings. It's very, very tolerant of inaccuracies. You know, everything doesn't have to be perfect, and you can still get pretty good sound out of an analog system. The better you can make things, everything does make a difference, though. So every little change that we can make, we can improve the bearing and machine it by an extra thousandth of a millimeter, get that little extra precision. It's going to make a difference in the performance. Tone arm bearings, make sure you have the correct downforce. You know, make sure the cartridge is perfectly mounted. Every little thing you do can make a positive and immediate difference. And it's not that sort of difference like, hey, I read on the internet that if I don't want to piss anybody off with the audiophile treat, but if I do, you know, if I stand on my head on a full moon, then, you know, it'll really improve my sound stage. And it's like, I don't know about that. Like, this stuff is actually, there's really good mechanical reasoning behind, you know, what those improvements are. All right, so now we got our belt mounted. One thing, so we have about 13 CNC machines in-house, so we do an awful lot of aluminum parts at Pro-Ject. These we do in-house. Just make sure when you get that belt that it doesn't sit on that top of that ridge. There's actually the entire belt should drop right inside that little ridge. Now, platters. And this is going to go to one of Joe's favorite things.
Look at that.
Yeah. So we really like to use a heavier platter as you move up. RPM 10 carbon, still spinning. As you
It's awesome.
As you move up and spend more money, you're going to get a more massive platter. So like a debut carbon comes with about a 1.25 kilogram steel platter. Steel's pretty good. It's great, it's super consistent. But one of the downsides is rings. Acrylic, this is a great way for us to get more mass, and it's inert. So this is about a 2 kilogram platter that we include with the X2. Give you a little bit lighter 1.5 kilogram platter with the little brother, the X1. The other thing I love about this, and this is sort of like the satin black finish, steel, or if you have a felt mat on a turntable, as soon as you put that felt mat on here, it's going to have dust, cat hair, you know, whatever sort of things are going to get picked up immediately. It's going to end up right on you don't have to have a cat, and there will be cat hair on that felt mat.
Exactly.
The acrylic platter.
Yeah, that's my favorite.
There it was.
I love that line.
So that was for you, buddy.
Thank you.
It was a little hard to work in. It's a little hard to work in. Usually that's around the satin black finish. But yeah, that's a really nice thing. So the acrylic platter, you can run this no problem without a mat. Some people still like to run it with a mat, so we usually recommend cork, or we make one that's cork with rubber built in. So that actually does a nice job. Breaks up, even gives a little more mass, and it can further damp any sort of unwanted resonance you might pick up from the platter. All right, so now we got the basics all connected. Now for the last part. So this is just, we're gonna balance the arm. So if one of the nice things about buying a turntable like this, like the X2, is it already has that factory mounted Sumiko Moonstone moving magnet cartridge. So you don't really have to mess with the cartridge too much. But I did think that this was a good opportunity to point out a couple of the tools that you have available. If you wanted to use a different photo cartridge, or down the road you were going to mount, say you had moved up, you bought one of the Sumiko Songbird moving coil carts. We include a super basic little protractor with a lot of our turntables. For those of you that are playing along at home, this is Lofgren A. There's 5 or 6 different types of alignments, depending on where that phono cartridge is going to be exactly in the center of the groove. They'll have 2 what they call null points. So that's one of the dirty little secrets about using not a linear tracking type tone arm, but using a single pivot tone arm to trace what's happening in a round groove, is it's never perfect. The geometry, you're always going to be a little bit off. So there's 2 points where the groove is the needle is directly perpendicular to the rotation of the record. So it's right in the center of the groove. So in this case, we give you that little thing. If you ever wanted to check it, it's actually kind of fun. If you want to check to see if the factory got it right, and I'm yet to see one that they've screwed up.
Here we go on live TV, folks.
Yeah, that's it.
You mentioned that earlier.
So, there's a little drop right in the center. No, actually, just drop that. I'm not gonna worry about balancing it yet. And you can test it. So there's a little grid there, and that grid will serve 2 things. So one, it'll have the exact point where the center, the tip of the stylus should drop right onto that corresponding point and then also the body of the cartridge should be parallel to the lines on the grid. So if you look and all of a sudden that you see that the phono cartridge is actually cocked over to one direction or the other, that means you're going to get uneven wear in the stylus. Instead of riding directly down the center of the groove and tracing both groove walls evenly, it's going to be riding to one side or the other. So you really want to make sure that that's properly mounted. So in this case, this guy's perfect. So we're ready to go. There's a bunch of different ways to do this. So there's, you can look up online. There's about 4 different really common alignment tools. And really all it's about is where do you want the 2 null points to be? So in the case of this particular alignment, we're actually a little bit, we're not quite right. The perfect point isn't right at the edge of the record, and it's a little further in towards the label than on some of the other possible alignments. So the idea is, what kind of music are you listening to? Mr. Lichtenegger is a big classical music fan, and in many cases, if you're listening to a big orchestral piece, you're getting full output all the way up to almost the label of the record. So you're going to have an awful lot of information there. So you want to make sure that you're not getting any additional, what they call intergroove distortion, as you get towards the center of that record, the end of the side.
Right.
So that's why he uses this particular alignment. If you're listening to more pop music or maybe singles that have less information, or most of it's out towards the edge of the record, there are other alignments that actually do a better job and place their null points further out towards the edge. So this is what I kind of was saying. Just about everything you do does matter. You can get as crazy as you want with this. And we have all kinds of folks online that spend hours going through different possible alignments and listening to what they think sounds best. As with most things, we chose one that works really well for a wide range of music.
Sure.
And that's what we have. So that's one basic. That's really simple protractor. We include that with most of our tables. And you can find these online. Great resource at Vinyl Engine that actually includes some downloadable protractors as well. This is a little hard to see in this case, but this has 3 different alignments. So it's got the Bearwald curve, Lofgren, and Stevenson. So we've got 3 different possible alignments on this tool. This is called an Align It DS2. When you're setting up something like
is that something you sell?
This is a Pro-Ject part called the Align It DS2.
Okay, cool.
My favorite though is where the heck did I put it? It's awfully big to be hiding. My favorite though is this guy. This is a product that we call the Align It. All of what we looked at before, these are all 2-point mounts because they don't know the length of the tone arm. So they can't precisely match, hey, how far is the tip of that stylus going to be from the rotating point of the main bearing? So the idea with the Align It is this actually is an adjustable tool. And depending on the length of the tone arm, this can go all the way out to a 12-inch arm like you'd have on our Signature 12, a 9 or 10-inch arm, 8.6, or even a 7-inch arm. So depending on the particular length of the tone arm that's involved. So I believe for this guy, we want to be on number 4, which is for a 9-inch arm. And the Align It, this is a really cool tool. Something I recommend any really good setup dealer, they're going to have some version of their own setup protractor. This is about a $200 part that we make available from Pro-Ject. But the idea here is we actually put that on. Let's get that back to number 3. There's number 2.
Now this doesn't come with the turntable, right? This is just an additional product you guys are selling.
Yeah.
Even the plastic one that, or the other one that he sold or mentioned earlier.
That one came.
Yeah,
with
so
it,
that's you get the basic
That's right.
cardboard type protractor, and it does a nice job. But here we go. So number 2. So I've got this all aligned. So if we were all the way at number 5, that'd be for a 12-inch, 10-inch. This is for a 10-inch S-shaped, and then number 2, this is for a 9-inch tone arm. So here's the cool thing: we know the exact distance between the point of the stylus and the pivot point of the actual tone arm. So in this case, we can drop this, make sure everything's tightened up. But this is a super easy way to double check with a great degree of precision. And because you don't have to do it at 2 different points, you minimize the amount of hey, tightening up the cartridge, moving the cartridge, try the second location, move it again. You just do it once and you're done. So in this case, we just go out here, rotate the tool to make sure that we're at the correct spot. And then there's a little dot that corresponds with the number that's listed here on this little acrylic piece. Yep. So you drop the needle, make sure that it sits right on that dot, and you're done.
You're good
it's
to
a
go.
single point alignment tool. So if you're doing a lot of turntable setups, a tool like this just makes a lot of sense. The other cool thing with this product is it also gives you a little mirror. So this allows you to really easily look and just check to make sure that the azimuth is correct. So when we talk about azimuth, am I dropping the needle directly down flat, or is the entire arm tube tilted just a little bit? All Pro-Ject arms, well, up to from the 8.6-inch aluminum arm right on up, do have an azimuth adjustment. 99% of the time, actually more than that, it's going to be fine. Don't mess with it. It's one of those things that once you loosen it, chances are you'll never get it back. If it doesn't need fixing, don't do it. But if you see that the stylus isn't exactly perpendicular to the surface of that mirror, this will allow you to change that azimuth, make that proper adjustment, get better tracking. So the good news is all these other tools that we just talked about, you don't have to mess with any of them because this has been set up from the factory and is ready to rock. So they do a really good job making sure that that cartridge is properly mounted. So last thing we really need to do is worry about set up the proper amount of downforce. All right, this is just telling how much force is being pushed down, or is the front of the stylus being pushed down on the surface of the record. Too much force, we're going to get uneven wear, we're going to get a lot of distortion, the suspension of the cartridge can't handle the weight, so eventually it's going to not only damage the record, but damage the cartridge itself. Not enough, and you're not going to track properly. If you get something with a lot of energy, it could actually force the stylus out of the groove and cause it to skip across the record. So it's really all about finding that right balance. Just about any of the Sumiko cartridges, we're going to want to see around 1.8 grams of downforce. So this is kind of a cool thing with Pro-Ject. So you level out the arm, and you want to make sure that the stylus guard has been removed, because again, that's got a lot of mass. So we don't want to balance it with the guard on there and then realize that we've improperly balanced it because it was taking into account weight that's not there during playback. So really you're just going to rotate the counterweight. So in this case, I'm going clockwise. It's always hard to do, like stage clockwise.
Exactly.
House clockwise. So you want to get it so it just kind of floats. So once we've got that tone arm pretty well floating, this is the trick. So you gently put the arm back in the rest, hold the main portion of the weight so it doesn't move, and gently move that 0 so that it's sitting in the 12 o'clock position. All right. And then now all I have to do is rotate in to right around between 15 and 20. And this is where you're going to get always makes us a little crazy. Grams is a measure of mass. Millinewtons is a vector force. So when we're talking about applying downforce, that's in millinewtons. So that's why this thing is calibrated in millinewtons instead of grams. Thankfully, it's just multiplied by 10. So you're going to get pretty close. So you get between 15 and 20, and then lift the lift the tone arm lift, and then we can give it a shot. All right, so good. We've got pretty good weight there. Now, if you wanted to check that didn't want to just use this, some of our turntables do include a little seesaw type scale, but we also make available a really cool little, digital scale. This one's called the Measure It E. But there's a bunch of them out there. You can get them from a lot of different suppliers. But this little guy's a great choice if you're doing a lot of turntable setups, or you just, you got a couple of tables around the house and you like checking this stuff out. I've already taken the liberty of balancing this out and zeroing it out to making sure it's okay. So what I'm going to do here is just position it over right on the center of that scale. I'm going to drop it, and I'm tracking it 1.9. So I'm just a little bit hot. So I'll reduce that just a little bit. Give it an extra test. All right, and we're ready to rock. So one last thing. Pro-Ject, we do believe in anti-skating. So this is kind of I don't know why it's controversial, but I don't really think it should be. But as a disc is rotating, as it's spinning, there's going to be a natural tendency of that arm to get pulled in towards the center of the spindle. So that extra force applied to one side of the stylus can cause a little bit more record wear, can cause an uneven distortion, and uneven wear on your records. So we apply a little anti-skate weight to cancel out that cancel out that force that's drawing it towards the center of the spindle. And that's pretty simple. So this little, well, of course, this particular weight doesn't have that little monofilament, but see, I knew there'd be something that didn't go right on this.
Exactly.
But there's a little monofilament line that attaches to this weight. There's on the back of the tone arm, there's 3 notches in this little escutcheon here. We'd put it over the second notch, hang it over this hanger here, and that just provides an equal amount of anti-skate force to cancel out that force that's drawing it towards the center of the spindle as the record's playing. And we use this real simple monofilament on a string, weight on a monofilament string, because it's simple. And it really does. It provides nice even force as we track across the entire surface of the record. So unlike a spring-loaded system or a magnetic system, which can also be pretty effective, but magnets, as you get them further away, of course, they're going to have less effect on each other. If you get them closer, you're going to get more resistance. So you're not going to get even anti-skate across the entire range of motion. So we use that simple system. But that's it. So that's a pretty quick setup, and that's, you're ready to rock and roll with a really good sounding $1,500 turntable.
Right on. Thank you so much, Jeff, for that demo, man.
Sure.
There's a lot of somebody just said not kid friendly at all. Yes, definitely. Definitely not. Here's another question. I think you already answered this, and this was I have records that are 78 RPM. Does Pro-Ject have any components that accommodate them?
Sure.
And I believe you do, right?
Yeah,
absolutely.
Jeff. Yeah, you touched on that a little bit earlier. If you want to go back into it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure thing. So this makes it a little bit more kid friendly. You have a nice hinged acrylic dust cover. Any of our rectangular plinth tables are going to have a hinged acrylic cover, and it's actually a really nice hinged part. So it's it's going to do a good job. So in this case, 33 to third, 45, or if you wanted to, if you removed the platter, use the round belt. And then you could go to the outside, the bottom ring on this pulley, and then when you clicked it over, you'd be at 78 RPM. So yeah, absolutely. So starting at the debut carbon is 3DC, so a $600 retail product. We do have the ability to play back 78 RPMs as well. Keep in mind, if you're playing back 78 RPM discs, you do need to have a conical steel stylus. You do not want to put a modern elliptical diamond stylus on one of your precious 78s. You will leave a peel of shellac right up the record, and you will never ever hear it again. You notice, how do I know that you'll do that? Because at some point, I was
done it before.
Playing the 78s. Yeah, exactly. Pre-Pro-Ject, but you will ruin your record, so be careful about that. You'll need a special stylus for 78 RPM playback. But yeah, so starting in the debut line with the debut Esprit SB, and then a lot of our other turntables that do have electronic speed change will give you that option.
I like how you guys have a full lineup from, you know, $300-400 on up to, you know, I need to sell my car
Right.
price level. So that's pretty cool. And speaking of special stylists, I had a question for you.
Sure.
I see a lot of well, repressings, not pressings, repressings of mono albums. Like I got a
Yes.
Beatles Revolver in mono. I got a Jimi Hendrix Electric Ladyland in mono. Do I really like, how important is it to use that with a mono stylus?
Well, and this is one of the great analog questions, right? Because everything absolutely makes a difference.
Okay.
You can totally play back a mono pressing on a stereo cartridge. You can do it, and you're going to get really good performance. In a perfect world, you'll get identical signal coming out of both channels. And then if you had a mono button on your preamp, great. It's just going to sum it for you. You're going to get really good response.
Okay.
So it just depends. If you were to purchase, we actually have the Beatles the Beatles singles collection debut SB S-shaped turntable available. And that actually ships with 2 detachable head shells. One of them has a mono cartridge installed on it.
Oh,
so
wow.
We do think
Convenient.
for best possible performance, yeah, you want to have a mono cartridge. But you can play them back with the stereo cartridge and you get great results.
Very good. Very good. Here's another question.
Great. Love them.
Does Pro-Ject have a linear tracking turntable?
We do not. And I sort of alluded to that a moment ago. Linear tracking has sort of been like the holy grail for tone arm designers for years. There was a lot of early, Marantz had one, Repco had one, Harman Kardon used, Phase Linear. A lot of guys over the years have tried out different linear tracker. Heck, even Techniques had some little linear trackers. The reason a lot of companies we've all kind of gotten out of it is it's really, really, really difficult to keep an arm. And a linear tracking turntable basically means instead of having a single pivot point, and then, you know, we're always transcribing arc across the surface of the record.
Right. Yep.
In the case of a linear tracker, we'd just be moving from the outside edge right to the spindle, but the stylus would always be positioned at, let's call this the 3 o'clock position on the record.
Right.
All right. So it would go directly across. Now, theoretically, that means we always have perfect alignment with the groove wall.
Right.
So both grooves are going to be directly centered across the entire surface. But as you can imagine, getting a mechanism that without any sort of additional friction was going to track exactly at the correct speed, and that's going to change, right? Depending on how much. We're talking 33 1/3 RPM, but the groove's getting shorter and smaller and smaller and smaller as you get towards the center. So that's really, really difficult to actually track. So most manufacturers kind of gave up on those kind of in the 70s. I don't know if anybody's had a new one since probably the early 80s.
I
no,
saw
we don't
one.
do any linear tracking.
I saw one at the show last year when we were
really
presenting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh,
it was super expensive.
Clear Audio. I'm sorry.
It was a Clear Audio
does
table.
Still do a linear
Okay.
tracker. That's right.
Okay.
They're very
Must have been that.
flagship. Yeah, that's about a $200,000 deck. If I
Yeah, it
remember
was in the
correctly.
Wilson
So-
audio room, so I would imagine it's up
Yeah.
there.
Yeah, really, really difficult to get something. I mean, it's a very, very high level of precision to move that correctly. So yeah, I mean, that's one of those things that we just know for a given amount of money. And that's kind of what we do with Pro-Ject, right? We know that by using a really, really, really excellent gimbal and 2 very, very high quality knife edge or pinpoint bearings in here, we can get really great tracking. And with proper alignment, we can eliminate the null point over, for what you're going to really notice for most playback.
Hey,
There was a few.
But yeah, good question.
Go ahead and
Yeah.
answer a few more questions. Afterwards, I just wanted to make sure, if you it's possible.
Go ahead.
Make
I'm
sure to
happy
stick
to field
around.
any other questions. Otherwise, you guys tell me kind of where I didn't set up a proper clock.
No, you're good. We got
to know where
You're,
kind of
you're good
time
on
we
some
got.
time.
Yeah,
you're good
No,
on time.
no worries.
Yeah.
We're just saying
I'm happy
after
to
this is
talk some
done,
more.
if you can possibly jump
hey,
into
while I got the
the
gloves
chat.
up here, let me show you guys something else pretty cool. This is it's going to be a puppet show, actually.
Puppet show.
Oh, mercy.
Yeah.
No.
It's no, I want to show you off one of our phono preamps. So this is one of the other things as you kind of move down the chain. A lot of AV receivers in the last couple of years are starting to put phono stages back in, which is kind of a good thing. But what we're finding is that, you know, a lot of the phono stage that you're building into a modern AV component, it's just, there's only so much you can do. You know, when you look at what a $1,500 or $2,000 AV receiver has to do, network capability, HDMI switching, you know, advanced DSP-based speaker equalization. I mean, there's an awful lot. The phono stage that they're using is going to be pretty basic. So at Pro-Ject, one of the things we also do is we make a full range of electronics. So streamers, amplifiers, preamplifiers, DACs, and of course, phono stages. A little over a year ago, in commemoration of our 500,000th phono preamplifier, so we've made an awful lot of these in the last 15 years. We came up with this guy. So this is the PhonoBox Ultra 500. So this is a $400 retail phono stage. But one of the things that's very, very cool about it, you notice on the bottom here, we've got all of these switches for adjustment. So just about any phono cartridge can be accommodated with this preamp. So moving magnet cartridges, they're all pretty easy. Electrically, they're all about the same. We want to see a 47 kilo ohm load impedance. But when you start playing around with moving coil, that's where things get crazy. And every moving coil cartridge is going to have slightly different electrical characteristics that it wants to see. So a lot of our better phono stages give you that full range of adjustments. So spending around $300, you can get into something from Pro-Ject that'll work with both high and low output moving coils and give you a wide range of adjustable gain and loading. Also has a defeatable subsonic filter. So you guys have all seen that at some point. If somebody's got something weird going on with their system and the woofer cones just slowly are moving in and out, that's could be subsonic energy that are picked up by resonance from the tone arm or in the groove itself. So that subsonic filter, let's get that away, free up our amplifier from trying to reproduce that stuff that doesn't make any sound for us anyway. But this is a great sounding little phono stage. Runs about $400, fully copper chassis that's then chrome plated. So the copper, all about eliminating any sort of EMI, so electromagnetic interference or RFI. Basically acts as a little Faraday cage, because this is what I love. Josh has got those big 600 watt monoblocks behind him. Yeah. And I'm holding a phono stage in my hand. Now, which one of these do you think does more work electrically?
The phono stage?
It's going to be the phono stage.
Yes, it's going
to be
the trick question.
I was waiting for you guys, but
yeah, no. So it's.
I figured it was trick questions. I'm just chilling out.
Yeah, it's a good one, right? But it's so in terms of decibels of gain, if you've got a 2-volt line level signal coming in, and you only got to get that up to 80 volts, which is your amplifier rail voltage. Of course, it takes a lot more electrical energy because we're moving a lot of current. You're trying to get a lot of power across that 8 ohm load to get it out into the room. But just in terms of decibels of gain, this guy is doing up to about 68 dB of gain, so that a low output moving coil cartridge's tiny signal can be brought up to line level. So really important that you've got a good, clean, quiet phono stage as the basis of any system.
So I'm going to then assume that none of the Pro-Ject turntables have like a built-in phono preamp.
Oh yeah,
we do.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
You do?
Yeah. And this is, from a real world standpoint, when you get to kind of this range, a $1,500 table, it doesn't make a lot of sense for us to put one. Yeah, you're going to want something outboard.
Okay.
It's just going to get you better performance. Cool. But let's say, one of our most popular places to connect a turntable these days is plug it into a powered speaker system.
Right.
Yeah.
You got your Kios or Blue Sound or Sonos or whatever, or your Play-Fi system from McIntosh. You want to plug in a turntable. Those things don't have a phono stage built in.
Sure.
So in that case, something like our T1 Phono SB or Debut Record Master, they've got a really nice, basically about $100, actually $79. They'd have our PhonoBox MM built into the chassis of the turntable. So even at that level, that's going to smoke what you're going to find in most AV receivers, up to about $2,000. And I've done that direct comparison. It's pretty amazing when you use that little outboard phono stage. Nice performance bump.
Yeah, I saw that one.
Hey Jeff, awesome. we had a question a bit earlier about
Sure.
our isolation method. So one person asked, how does Pro-Ject isolate their turntable? So obviously we have different approaches. Sure. So you have two tables with two very different philosophies in terms of isolation there in front of you. Yes. So if you could touch on that, that'd be awesome.
Sure. So this guy's pretty good. I'm glad he's here. This is go ahead.
Very quickly though, because we have just a few minutes before we have to jump into the Sonus Faber seminar.
Go ahead, Jeff. If
Go
you can
ahead.
talk about it
Oh, I'm
really
sorry.
quickly.
I thought there was a
You're
segue.
just saying you
very
have
quickly.
you have
Yeah,
He's just
quick.
setting the
So we've
stage for you,
basically
buddy.
got three different ways that we isolate a turntable. So if you look at our big products, something like the Signature series, actually even the X series, this is basically we have a large solid plinth and some version of an isolation foot. All right, but there's no suspended sub chassis. This is really going to be all about mass, and it still wants to sit on a good solid base. If you look at something like our classic SB, that's actually a suspended sub chassis design. So in that case, you'll see that the top platter or the top plinth, excuse me, is going to be separate than the surface that the actual bearing for the main bearing and the motor sits on. So you'll have the tone arm up on one surface, and it's physically isolated from its plinth from the main plinth, where the main bearing and the motor sits. So that's a suspended sub chassis design. The other one is like the big dog here off to my side, the RPM 10 carbon. In this case, this basically has zero isolation built into the product itself. Everything is designed to go to a 3 cone type feet. So it's all about taking internal vibration, sinking it to ground. So in this case, we actually include about a 35-pound carbon fiber wrap mass loaded plinth that turntable sits on. So the job of this and its isolation foot that's on the bottom of it, this is designed to absorb any sort of exterior vibration, as well as behave as a sink for any vibration generated by the table itself. So 3 different philosophies, 3 very different kind of designs. And it's really all about kind of what works best in a particular scenario.
Well, very good,
cool.
Jeff. Thank you
So a lot of
for
cool
doing
stuff.
this.
It's a huge line. We make a great lineup of turntables, just about every price, and find something for a budget or application. But whether that's plugging into a powered speaker system, or all the way out to a really big audiophile turntable used with an esoteric cartridge, we've got a solution for you.
Well, I'll let Jeff take us out here.
Oh, we can't hear.
Oh, there's no audio.
No?
No.
Oh,
Oh,
okay.
hey, look at that guy.
Hold on.
That's just like,
he had it all
Yeah.
queued up, man.
All
on.
good.
Oh man.
Hold
It
on,
looks
hold
great.
on. I'm gonna get
Thank
this.
you, Jeff, from Pro-Ject,
My pleasure.
and stick around, everybody. We'll be right back with Sonus Faber as day 4 of the Hi-Fi Summit continues.
And it's everywhere.
Thanks, guys.
We're doing the same
Thanks,
thing.
guys.
Beautiful satin black. We kind of joke around here that as soon as you put a piano black piece down, of course, you're going to get dust, you're going to get fingerprints, you're going to get cat hair. You don't even have to have a cat. A piano black product just attracts all that